Welcome you today to the Metropolitan Community Church of Washington, D.C. Spiritual Engagement Hour, a time of spiritual conversation and learning and growing together. I invite us today to take just a few moments to be present to our bodies, our souls, our minds. Here in Washington, D.C., it is spring forward. And for some of us, it's noticeable in our body that we've been up an hour earlier today. And so, you to take just a moment to be present as we light this candle today. There are three flames: Creator, Christ, and Holy Spirit. And these flames also remind us of beloved community and our invitation to be together. By way of prayer today, I invite us just again to take that moment to center into peace. And today we are offering Psalm 63 in the Nan Merrill version, Psalms for Praying, an Invitation to Wholeness. O love, you are my beloved, and I long for you. My soul thirsts for you. All that is within me thirsts as in a dry and barren land with no water. So I have called out to you in my heart, sensing your power and glory. Because your wondrous love is life in me, my lips will praise you. I would radiate your love as long as I live, becoming a blessing to others in gratitude to you. My soul feasts as with a magnificent banquet, and my mouth praises you with joyful lips. When I ponder on your kindness and meditate on you throughout the night, for you have been my salvation, and in the shadows of your wings I will sing for joy. My soul clings to you, for your love upholds me. The fears that seem to separate me from you shall be transformed and disappear. As they are faced, each fear is diminished. They shall be gone as in a dream when I awaken, and my soul shall rejoice in the beloved. All who open their hearts to love will live in peace and joy. And so it is. And it's why we gather together to support each other, to learn from each other, to pray together, to share our stories, and to be a people who are growing in the ways of love. And so during this season, we have a new theme. And the theme we have for the season of Lent is everything in between. And it's about finding that place in the midst of the extremes. And the logo for the series are two hands almost connecting. Can't quite get this to show on the screen the right way, but they're almost touching, and it speaks to the longing we have for connection. And in addition to not quite touching, the logo creates an entryway in the middle of that place seeking connection. And so during this season of Lent, we're going to be going deeper into what it means to find that place in between the polarities and the extremes. It's about moving beyond binary thinking. It's about finding that entryway right through those places where we seek to connect. So we're taking a little bit of a different approach to Lent. In some traditions, people talk about what are you going to give up for Lent? People talk about penitential. They talk about aligning with suffering. We're going to take more of a grace-filled approach this year. We see it as a season of growth, anticipation, and exploration. So we'd like to begin by just seeing what are some of your thoughts. When you think of Lent, what comes to your heart and mind? And perhaps you're from a tradition that did not practice Lent, and it's like you might say, well, nothing comes to mind.
Well, I grew up Lutheran, so my tradition was, well, I guess you'd say very traditional in that respect, and the focus on, you know, repentance and giving up things and that type of thing. Not so much with the themes that, you know, you've mentioned at all. And so this is, you know, new to me, and also very refreshing to rethink my focus on what, you know, Lent can be.
Thank you. Other thoughts on Lent? When we approach the season of Lent, do you find yourself kind of excited about it? Or a little bit, here we go. On the way to the cross. Come on in.
I was gonna say for me, the season of Lent is about like drawing really close to spirit. Like I was raised Catholic, so it's about like suffering and, you know, penance kind of thing. But my grandmother always explained it. It's like more than that. It's drawing close to God and walking with Jesus, and like just really studying those 40 days before the crucifixion. So
Yes. So a season of drawing close. And that kind of speaks to this theme of trying to find that place to meet, that place to draw close, and that entryway in that sense of drawing close. I love the logo, so I'll keep doing this thing with my hands.
I guess I appreciate that, and I think I have some of that, but I also have long had a sense that somehow Lent was our time to pay for the crucifixion. That we knew the resurrection was coming, but we had to get through this, and we're really the agents of crucifixion in some ways, because of the kinds of imperfect people we are. And I was really resistant to Lent, I have to admit.
Yeah.
Because it felt one-sided. So I was glad to see and to hear you this morning, and also to read your comments earlier, to think about it in a different way, perhaps. I sort of stopped thinking about Lent, and I want to get back to paying attention to it in a way that's more positive.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Greetings to you and your beloveds there in New Jersey. Glad that you're with us.
Well, for me, I wasn't raised religiously, so I mean, I was raised in Christian culture, but not religion or spirituality. Well, I had my own spirituality, but so I didn't know what Lent was. I still don't really know what it means.
Okay, yeah.
But I remember I was always attracted to this idea of the ritual of, for me, the way that I learned about it kind of like basically was like, oh, you give something up as part of your spiritual practice. But I do remember, I think I tried it. I remember my sister and I tried it, giving something up, but it was like this really negative connotation, like, oh, you need to be a better person, so you need to give something up that's like something that was, it was tied into the notions of self-improvement that weren't really spiritual. Like, oh, give up sugar or something like
Yeah.
about, that was ultimately, I think, more about like us wanting our bodies to look different or something like that. It was never the meaning behind, it was very basic, but I'm very interested to learn more about it. Yeah, it was almost like those parts of our brain commandeered this idea and turned it into what our adolescent minds needed to try to fit in with other people. That was really more about putting ourselves down than anything else.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
easy for it to turn that way, so
Yeah,
it sure is. And that's oftentimes the very first question that someone will ask is, what are you giving up for Lent? This idea of giving up, and in fact, I officiated a graveside service this past Thursday at Congressional Cemetery. And the funeral director said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." He said, "What are you giving up for Lent?" And it was a wonderful opportunity to reframe Lent. And so the response to the question was, "I'm not giving anything up, but I am taking something on." And I talked about the practice that I'm looking to do this season during Lent, which is each night at 10 p.m. I'm going to turn an hourglass that Andre gave me. And as I turn it, I'm going to speak life at that moment and say, I turn from the busyness and the anxiety and the stress of the day, and I turn to rest and peace and grace. And so a key word this year for Lent is the word grace. What can we do to bring more love into our life? What can we take on to bring more love into our lives and more grace into our lives? And is there a way to make that a tangible practice? So that's the one that came to me, was this idea of an hourglass practice. It's rooted to the Benedictine tradition of the Great Silence. And in the Benedictine tradition, the monks enter silence, usually at 10 p.m. And then they speak no other words until the next morning, about 7:30 a.m. And the last words are words of spirit and faith. And then the first words in the morning are words of spirit and faith. So that's the other part of the practice I'm taking on, is in the morning to go to the hourglass immediately and to say a phrase like, I turn from, again, anxiety, fear, whatever it might be that comes through spirit at that moment, and I turn to. It could be I turn from disconnection and I turn to connection. Holy Spirit, show me what it means to live with a sense of connection. So thinking about that, take a moment now and think, is there a practice, a grace-filled practice that maybe comes to your mind to do during the season of Lent? It's 40 days, not counting Sundays. And so in the more traditional aspect of Lent and the giving up, you give up something for Monday through Saturday, but on Sundays, it's considered a feast day. And so you can go ahead and do whatever you're giving up, you can do it on Sundays. You know, so if you're giving up sugar, Monday through Saturday, no sugar, and then Sunday, go ahead and have your banana split or whatever it is that you like. So I plan on doing my practice through all the season. And but that is part of the tradition of Lent. Also, in the tradition of Lent, you don't use the word hallelujah during the season of Lent, because you're again in that more penitential place. And yet that is not necessarily grace-filled, because there's one sense where you're recognizing this path to the cross. On the other hand, we acknowledge that Christ is risen, and we live that sense of resurrection, even as we acknowledge the journey there. So other thoughts on what Lent means to you, or what you're looking at maybe doing to practice Lent this year?
I mean, I have to say, for me, the giving up piece is not punishment or being part of the crucifixion, right? So as you, Reverend Robin, put it, for me, it's a place of awareness and refocus. So, and it's not that certain things we consume necessarily distract us, but for me, it helps me to be mindful of how I live, what resources I use, and how I, structure my life. Interestingly, I used to drink my coffee with sugar, and as I gave up sugar one season for Lent, now I drink my coffee always without sugar, because it has stayed with me, kind of a practice that put me awareness, and I actually noticed, I like it better without. And it's not for me, it wasn't a question of punishing me, it was, being mindful, and it was something that I didn't expect to happen. But so for me, actually, I look forward to this season of Lent in that sense, because I try to be more aware of how I live. And so that's a piece that I actually enjoy about the Lent season.
Good. Thank you for that perspective. Yeah. So it may be that releasing of something is a part of that. I prefer the word release to giving up. But it may be again that there's some real value, and the way you're framing it, it is about, in a sense, giving up or releasing, but it's not, it's with a sense of mindfulness, not suffering or penitential. Other thoughts? What you're considering for this year, or have already perhaps started?
Good morning.
Good morning, Jackie Lois. How's it in Detroit today?
Things are good. I'm a little discombobulated. I'm sorry I'm late. I missed the beginning. But from what I've heard about Lent, I wanted to, since that's our spiritual engagement hour, I have to disconnect about what I know about Lent from being a child and now, and the idea that you give up something, or you give something, or you do something for the 40 days in honor of, identifying your suffering with Jesus, and that somebody tells you what to do as opposed to you doing something, and it's not necessarily giving up. You're bad, and so you have to give it up. Like we used to have like a card, and you were supposed to put a dime in the card every day during Lent, and then whatever you would have spent that dime on, you put it in the card and then you give it to God, right? But today I feel differently about Lent. And good morning, Reverend Robin, I had a different, we used to write devotionals every day for Lent. That's a practice that I learned to see deepening my spiritual walk, using Lent as a time to, kind of like what Knut said, I gave up sugar and I realized that was a habit that I could easily give up. And now I don't do it anymore. Well, now a practice that I had was writing every day. Now I write every day, even if it's not Lent, because it's a spiritual practice. And the other thing I think I wanted to share about Lent for me this year is that I have felt so conflicted about being a Christian or being a follower of Christ because of how badly people have represented what I believe is the message from Christ. And so I wanted to share a Lenten devotional. You know the one I'm talking about, Pastor Dwayne?
Well, I think so. It's the one you sent me via text this week. It's really good. I encourage you to bring it today.
Yeah. So
Okay.
if it's okay, it's not long, but I will read it to you. And it's a very powerful statement about where I am about fasting and feeding, fasting, how are you nurturing yourself? How are you allowing yourself to do something that you wouldn't have ordinarily done, but you're doing it because you have a closer walk with God? Whoever you believe God, we have another member in our church who says, God's my homeboy. So what is it that you're doing with your homeboy? What is it that you're doing for these 40 days that's a commitment to your relationship? So this is from a devotional. I try to always give the attribution. A friend shared it with me who knows that I do Lenten devotionals. He says I'm an honorary Episcopal. I always crack up when he says that he's an Episcopal. And he says, we dare to say praying for justice and peace. That's our commitment for Lent. For 40 days, we're going to pray for justice and peace. And that we're going to fast from judging others, feast on the Christ dwelling in them. We're going to fast from emphasis on difference, feast on what we hold in common. Fast from apparent darkness, feast on the reality of light. Fast from thoughts of illness, feast on the healing power of God. Fast from words that divide, feast on the phrases that reconcile. Fast from discontent, feast on gratitude. Fast from anger, feast on patience. Fast from pessimism, feast on optimism. Fast from worry, feast on God's love. Fast from complaining, feast on appreciation. Fast from unrelenting pressure, feast on unceasing prayers. Fast from bitterness, feast on forgiveness. Fast from self-concern, feast on your compassion for others. Fast from personal anxiety, feast on eternal truth. Fast from discouragement, feast on hope. Fast from laziness, feast on enthusiasm. Fast from suspicion, feast on truth. Fast from thoughts that weaken, feast on promises that inspire. Fast from idle gossip, feast on purposeful silence. Fast from problems that overwhelm, feast on prayer that sustains life. Blessings. So thank you for letting me read that. My friend Peter used to go to, I want to say Trinity Church, which is down on Wall Street. Many churches have Lenten devotionals that they do every day in community. I love the idea of doing a devotion or something that you do in community with other people. And now that he lives in another city, he lives in South Carolina, he doesn't live in New York anymore. This idea is, how do we connect with people around the world globally and raise up our devotion and our beliefs and use the season of Lent as a time to kind of elevate that. I really love that idea. So thank you for letting me share. I like the idea about fasting from things that weaken us and feasting, enjoying things that strengthen us. So I'm just in a different place. I really believe that what we're doing here now redefines for me what it means to be a follower of Christ's teaching. The fact that we have people that say empathy is bad, the Pope on his deathbed is saying, no, don't let certain people speak for the Christ. Are any of you willing to speak up for Christ and speak up for Jews and speak up for Muslims? Who's willing? So that's my
Yeah.
soapbox. And fasting. So I'm trying to fast from those things.
Yeah, thank you. Fasting and feasting. Feasting on that which brings more love into our lives.
I feel guilty when someone else is suffering and I feel joy or happy. Like if I have bounty and I think about someone who's starving or cold, I feel guilty. That's a spiritual process. Can I have joy? Can someone not have something? And how do I move in that space? I think that that's a really, I mean, Jesus knows how Lent is going to end. Not well. This last week is not going to go well. But how do you go into it with joy and community and peaks and valleys? I think it's a real invitation during this season to do
Yeah.
that.
And we're gonna be talking more about what you just raised as part of this series. Because part of the emphasis of this series is to move beyond polarities. And so there's this idea of grief. And then there's this idea of joy. And is there a place where we can have joy and grief and hold them in a special place, honoring both? And so the question you raise is there this place where we can have empathy with someone who is suffering while continuing to experience joy in the midst of our own heart, or in the midst of that? Is there that kind of place? So it's we're gonna look at the nuances. There's a lot of nuances. And that's one of the things we'll look at. So thank you. Fast and feast. And the question is there some place in the middle between fasting and feasting? And what would that look like? But beautiful. I love what you read today. Other things that are kind of stirring up or questions you might have for the group, promptings. This is a time again for us to support each other in this journey. Support each other in navigating the times we live in, which are really difficult, as we know.
Jackie, thank you so much. I'm going to send you an email, ask you to send that to me. I'd really love to have it. And I also realize you mentioned the person who had talked about being some kind of Episcopalian honorary or something like that. That reminded me, and I don't want to get negative here, but that reminded me of how rule-based, when I talked earlier, how rule-based my growing up in the Episcopal Church was around a lot of things, but certainly Lent, and how there wasn't much grace. And I don't want to take it out on Episcopalians. They're good people and all that, and there are lots of good things happening in that church. But my experience a long time ago, 60, 70 years ago, was it was very rule-based, and you had to do it this way, and it meant this, and that was that. And so there's and what Reverend Dwayne, you're talking about in terms of actually working with our own souls and the wider picture and so on, to be more open and creative. That's very wonderful. I really appreciate that very much. And I just don't think I had realized how much I was still carrying that rule-based thing around in my head. I don't want to.
Yes, Sarah, come on in.
Yeah, you knew I was gonna say that.
I can tune with body language.
Yeah. Well, this conversation is so rich and it's really making me think about balance. And I feel like in such a different place than when I walked in today already, like. like my friend and a spiritual friend, for him, he always says God is balance. That's, for him, that's his God. And it makes me think about like Taoism or like the middle way in Buddhism, like, or feast and famine, like everything today just keeps coming back to balance for me, like the hands. And I'm thinking of like releasing and bringing in, they're two sides of the same coin. So maybe it doesn't matter which one we're looking at, because it's the same thing either way. Like flipping the timer, the sand timer, it's like there is a release in that of the busyness, and there's a welcoming of the grace or the space. So I'm starting to think about it like that, like, oh, because in a lot of ways, my life feels so out of balance and has for a while. So I'm thinking of ways that can bring balance that would be both a release and a welcoming.
Nice.
And for me, I'm thinking maybe like I draw a lot from internal family systems. You guys know what that is? It's like parts, attending to different parts of myself. So maybe like taking the time every day to check in with my parts and care for them, because that feels out of balance.
Yeah,
And then that, like in the reading, it helps me address those fears to then move closer to the divine. Because a lot of times I'm just stuck in those fears and I feel so distant from God, and then I don't do anything about it because I'm just stuck in it. So maybe like bringing attention to caring for those parts of me would be welcoming in that relationship more.
nice. Yeah,
I really love listening to you and hearing what you're saying, and the idea about duality and balance, that as I get older, not older like age older, but as I spend more time in spiritual practice, the idea about balance is also this idea about compassion for myself, that I can feel two things at once and that I need to nap. And it's like when people say work-life balance or have balance, I'm less likely, which is very Buddhist, to like the whole middle way, like to be more accepting of myself, of like, God, I'm like really crazy today, or this is really bad. Well, you should take a nap. No, I shouldn't take a nap. I should seek balance. No, take a nap. This idea that this is something that we struggle with, or not struggle, but that we're going to face it every day, that every day is not going to be the way, and how do we tolerate? I mean, we know we can't tolerate it in other people. Well, if we're going to tolerate it in other people, how do we tolerate it? Compassion for ourselves. So I really, really love that you brought that topic up about seeking balance. And did you say what somebody who talked about grief? Like, I realize I'm grieving now. A very dear friend is actively dying, and she's actively mad at me because I'm not at the bedside. But what I wanted to say about balance is that I realize I can grieve and be joyous at the same time. So as far as my writing practice, I decided I wanted to write about my relationship with her. And it's been so helpful to both grieve and love, but also I can't go be there. But it's been powerful for me to take care of myself and be compassionate. So thank you for bringing up the issue of feeling two things at once and seeking balance. Daily bread from heaven. That's a great practice.
yes. Thank you. In a world of extremes, where do we find Well, that's the subtitle for the series, is everything in between. And so we live in a world of extremes. We live in a world of polarities. We're going to talk about that throughout this season of Lent. So where do we find the center point? Now, balance, I've learned at times in my life that balance itself can become its own obsession. And so it's being aware of that as well. And so how does one, and there are times when it's gonna be very difficult to balance. If you're caring, for example, for a loved one, when John was dying of AIDS, during that whole process, there was no real balance. It changed the entire trajectory of both of our lives for a period of months. And so for me, the language during that time was not so much about balance, but finding grace. Because I called out to God, I don't know how we're going to get through this. I really don't. And there was almost an immediate response. And what I heard from the Spirit was, Dwayne, it's not going to be easy. I'm not going to make you a false promise, because as God, I wouldn't do that. However, I do promise you 3 things each day. I'm going to bring you a sense of humor. There's going to be something to laugh at every day. There's going to be something grace-filled every day. And one of the caregivers' name was Grace. So I always thought of Grace when she would come in and sit by the bedside. And then the third thing that God promised me was, you will never, ever be alone. And on the night of his passing, there was about 40 people. We were up on the 2nd floor. And people from the church had gathered on the lower floor there in Richmond. And that was true. His sister was there through much of it. And so was it balanced? No. Was it grace-filled? Yes. And so sometimes the phrase I use is finding the center point. The center that moves, but is still there in the midst of everything going on. So sometimes when things are flying around, say, okay, God, show me the center point, even at this moment, and going to that place. So balance, I'm not saying don't use that phrase. Balance is very important. It's a good word, and at times it can be complicated. Yeah. Welcome, Clara, by the way. Good to
Thank
see
you. Yeah, I've been listening to everyone talk. And one thing that really, well, all of it is coming to me, but there's something that Sarah said that I hadn't really thought about, and that's parts of the self.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes I feel so like I have to, well, I'm learning compassion for all of those cells, I'm calling it cells, because mostly because I didn't know what to do with them sometimes, like in the extremes. It's so extreme, it's like, oh God, I just give up. I can't handle it by myself, but then in that thing, I would used to beat myself up with judgment, but now I'm saying, okay, take a nap, or like Jackie was saying, take a nap, sleep it out, or whatever, but I didn't realize at that time that I was giving compassion to myself. I only looked at it as being coming to the point of not judging myself. And so by balance, sometimes it's not that easy to get to the balance. So I ask God to help me through the extremes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and take me through the extremes. What am I supposed to learn from this?
Yeah.
What is this going on? So instead of shrinking from it, it's like, okay, what gives now? What is this now? What am I supposed to look at?
Yeah. Talk more about that through this season, about this idea of acknowledging and befriending these parts of ourselves that show up at times uninvited, but there they are.
Yes.
There's a lot of conversation. There's people right now, because of what's going on around us, who are experiencing anger in new ways.
Yes.
And a lot of the voices from their religious training about loving your enemies, which is again a call, and it's a tough one right now. We're gonna talk more about that. I had a conversation with someone this past week who said, I've never in my life hated anyone until now. And they said, I don't know what to do with that. And I felt guilty for feeling hatred, and of course, that where it's directed is where, it's directed to Pennsylvania Avenue. And they're a little bit later in their life, and now they're here is this part that has shown up, and they're trying to process it and feeling guilt because we should not hate. That's part of it. We've heard those messages all our lives. And yet when those feelings show up, it's just one of those parts to have a conversation with. So, well, we're down to about 4 minutes here. And you've shared again with such richness today, as you always do, so much insight. We really do need each other. We need these conversations. So any kind of closing thoughts that you have, or any ideas you're working on, or what you're considering, if you've not already decided what you're going to consider as a practice for Lent, if there's one you're kind of playing with?
Well, I really, good morning, Clara.
Good morning, Jackie.
I really like the idea that, what I heard was that we're co-creators. And
Yeah.
I really was a person who was very uncomfortable with extreme emotion, extreme love, extreme anger, extreme hate. And I've not only become more accepting of the extremities, I've become more accepting that in order for me to manage or get through it, is that I need to create, I need to build something, I need to write a poem and do something that I believe is co-creating with the divine as a way to navigate difficult emotions. So that's what I wanted to share. And we're certainly at a point in time, and many of us have been there before, where we felt things that we never thought we would feel, see things that we never thought we would see, but here we are, and we are blessed to be living in this time. And so what do we do with it? So what now?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for framing that. We're blessed to be living in this time. That's something to ponder. It's a whole way of looking at it. And blessings and curses would be another one of these things to look at.
Thank goodness for the poets and the writers and the artists that help us express different.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Another thought or two, another prompting or two, or a pondering, or a question.
Well, I feel called. I was in a bookstore and I said, should I talk about this or what? And it says, how to be rich. But when I looked in the inside of the book, it wasn't really talking about riches. It was outlining how you work with your money in a legal way. And I'm saying, it's a 6 weeks course. And usually it's my thing to back off, because religiously, some of that stuff that I learned way back there is you treat money with respect, it'll take care of itself, but it didn't say anything about responsibility. And I am responsible, like paying my bills and doing this and allocating that. But I know there are some things come back, okay, if I got it here, why I borrowed? So somebody took a few pennies from me. Do I need to argue that point, like refund my money back that you took from me? You know, illegal, well, I said illegal. And so I said, that's a responsibility. Why am I shirking from that? I need to take care of it. So that, to get this balance, wow. Work to be prosperous if I'm not gonna act prosperous in the process of being there. And I'm not talking about so much as about money itself, but money is a part of it. Health is a part, everything is a part of it. But I found out with money, I sort of like, oh, it'll take care of itself. Somebody will figure it out, they'll stop. But I got called on it, so I feel led to
Okay, listen.
be responsible, listen to it, and this book seemed to, when I browsed through the book, it seemed to have things that, what I had been looking for guidance. Now, my thing is applying myself to it, to what the book is outlining, so. I think that's I'm seeking a balance in that.
Right, thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Well, thank you all again for this conversation today. As we talk.
Stephanie's still there.
Oh, Stephanie, I didn't see your hand up there. Come on in, Stephanie. You'll have our final thought today. Come right on in.
Okay. So for this season of Lent, I had wrote out like kind of like a mantra with the way that our politics and everything is going and my work. I've been a little on the anxious / stressed, and I'm like one of those people that I need to plan and prepare for everything and see everything as far as the eye can see. Like, and I know that's impossible because I'm only human. So I wanted to share this little mantra prayer thing. I don't know what you would call it. When I cannot see, give me your eyes. And when I cannot hear, give me your ears. When I cannot love, give me your heart. And when I cannot breathe, breathe into me. I know you calm the oceans, and I know you tear down mountains. I know you calm the lion, so I know I won't be burned.
Well, thank you. Perfect. That's our closing prayer today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
That was beautiful. Come to writers group on Saturday.
I don't, guys,
It's,
I'm 4 hours away.
it's online, so if you'd like to join us on the writers group, it's on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern time. It is totally online.
Yeah, put your
Sounds good.
email, send us your email, or just look in the bulletin. You can link up with us at Saturday at 10.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll come out in the e-blast on Thursday. There'll be a link there and or a way to get the link anyway, for sure. But that's a wonderful way for us to culminate this time today. And we've talked a lot about prayer. We didn't specifically say we're going to talk about prayer, but it's all pointed to that as well. So go now in love and grace and peace. Thank you again for your time with us today as we seek to support each other during this time when we really need support. Take good care. Bye-bye.